Good morning, writers. Let's get started filling out our writing learning intentions. First, make sure you fill out today's date, and today as a writer I am working on writing an all about chapter. The goal of this informational writing lesson is for you to be able to use a teaching tone while writing a minimum of 2 paragraphs that are 4 to 6 sentences in length, all about one of your topics. Alright, let's take a look at what this would look like. First, we know from our checklist that overall we need to teach readers different things about a subject and include facts, details, quotes, and ideas into each part of our writing. We also know that we need to make choices about which information is best to include and what we shouldn't include. And finally, we need to use our teaching tone. To do so, you might use some phrases like, "What that really means is," and "Let me explain." One thing that we need to remember when writing our informational books is that for each section we do, we need to use our reading notes to help guide our writing. You've worked very hard in reading to come up with lots of great notes, and we need to make sure we put those to use. We know that in all of our books, everyone's first all about chapter is going to be on immigration in general. So as we're going through our notes, we need to make sure that we're looking for things that are very specific to immigration in general. I noticed here that I have a note from blend space number 11 that says immigrants were hopeful. They had hoped to find a better life and were happy to be entering a free land. I think this might be something that's really useful to that first all about chapter for me. Remember that we also need to really pay attention to not only what information is best to include, but also what not to include. So if I'm writing about immigration in general, at this point I really don't need to include this other information that I have over here, because this information might be better for a different section of my book. So again, remember to do this writing, we need to use a teacher tone, and we need to make choices about what information is best to include. Alright, this is what I have so far for my Chapter 2, all about immigration. Listen as I read to find my facts, details, quotes, or ideas. Chapter 2, all about immigration. What is an immigrant? Have you or anyone in your family ever lived in another country or state? If so, they are an example of someone who emigrated from another place. For example, if the family member came from another state, we would say they are a migrant. If they came from another country, they are an immigrant. According to blend space number 11, immigrants were very hopeful when they came to America. They hoped to find a better life than the one they had in their home country. They were glad they were entering a free land. Many immigrants entered the United States through Ellis Island, but some entered through other immigration centers like Angel Island. Turn and talk to your partner now about what facts, details, quotes, or ideas you noticed in this section of my writing. And tell your partner if you think this was a good all about section or not. So far, we know that this section is good because it introduces the topic by asking a question. Each of our topics or all about sections does need to start like a normal introduction and start by asking a question or telling an interesting fact or something like that. So here is the part where it asks a question to begin and get the reader interested. We also know that this is a good section because it meets the requirements for Level 3 work by containing 2 paragraphs, and each of those paragraphs is 4 to 6 sentences. We also know that this section is good because it contains facts and all of the facts fit together. Something else you might have noticed in this section is that I have a couple of bolded words: emigrated, migrant, and immigrant. If you come across a word that you think your reader may not know, you need to put it into your writing as a bold word. Of these three things up top, the overall, what's best to include, and teaching tone, which one do I not have yet in my writing below? Turn and tell your partner. If you said teaching tone, you're correct. I did use some transitions in my writing, like if so and for example, but I did not use that teaching tone, saying things like what that means or what that really means, and let me explain. So I could go ahead and change my for example. To use a teaching tone, instead of saying for example, I might say, that means if the family member came from another state, we would say they are a migrant. Now let's take a look at that last sentence. If they came from another country, they are an immigrant. What teaching tone words might we use before this sentence to help make sure that we are including that in our writing? Turn and talk to your partner now. The example you just saw was a great example of level 3 work. Now I want to show you what level 4 work would look like. Really, you're doing the same. You're still doing paragraphs that are 4 to 6 sentences, but the difference now is that instead of having 2 paragraphs, you need to have 3 or more paragraphs in that chapter. So writers, remember that your goal today is to write an all about section that teaches readers different things about a subject using facts, details, quotes, and ideas, that you make choices about what's best to include or not include, and that you use a teaching tone. Remember that your level 3 work should have ask a question or give an interesting fact or tell a short story to introduce your section, should contain 2 paragraphs that are each 4 to 6 sentences, and all facts should fit together. And if you're someone who's working for level 4, you need to include all things that we talked about for level 3, as well as making sure that you have 3 or more paragraphs in your section. Let's work hard and make it a great day.